What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So can you believe it's been 6 months already since Samsung released their S24 lineup? And get this. In that time, these phones have essentially depreciated almost 50%. I realize that's a very outlandish and potentially triggering thing to say, so let me provide some context. If you go on Samsung's website, you can absolutely still pay the full retail price for any of the S24s. I highly suggest you don't do that. I mean, at least take advantage of a trade-in deal or one of Samsung's offer programs if you have to get the phone directly from them. But if you browse Amazon and sift through their renewed listings, their gently used and refurbished smartphone program, you'll see the S24 listed for as low as $430 right now. If that's not cheap enough for you and you specifically want 50% off, sellers on Swappa are dumping their S24s for as low as $370. And the S24 Pluses are just about to drop below $500. Check back in a week or two if you don't yet see that. It's coming. And these phones aren't like cracked and broken or stolen from some poor schlub on the subway. They're just previously used or open box returns with some scratches and signs of wear, but are otherwise the same current flagship phones that I paid like $1,000 for not too long ago. If you've been holding off on upgrading your phone, well, you win the game. Now is a great time to finally snag one of these at a huge discount. And I should also say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Samsung's S24 lineup. Nothing has caused this steep price decline on the secondary market. It's just the usual cycle of things. It happens every year. I actually think both the S24 and S24 Plus are great devices, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with these two phones over the last 6 months, as well as try and convince you to opt for the S24 Plus specifically, because I actually think this phone is the one to get this year. I mean, not only is the screen bigger, it's also better, and you get twice the storage and more RAM and a bigger battery. Seems like a no-brainer to me, but maybe you can try and change my mind in the comments. If you're upgrading phones, maybe upgrade your wireless carrier too with Tello, this video's sponsor. I first recommended Tello almost a year ago, and since then, not only have they gotten better, but they've also gotten cheaper. Tello offers affordable and customizable phone plans, so you pay for exactly what you need, only when you need it. Tello's Unlimited Everything plan is now just $25 a month, and Tello provides nationwide 4G LTE and 5G coverage, same great service as those big wireless companies, at a fraction of the cost. You also get additional perks like free hotspot and Wi-Fi calling and international calls to now more than 60 countries. There's no extra fees, no commitments. You can cancel at any time or adjust your plan whenever you'd like. And Tello also makes it easy to use your current phone on their network. Most GSM or unlocked devices are eligible, and you can check their website to see if you're compatible. Tello offers the most flexible and affordable phone plans out there, and they're also highly rated by their current customers, including me. Create a custom plan and see how much you can save at Tello.com, or click the link in the video description below. So one thing that's always been interesting to me with Samsung's S series is that the regular phone, in this case the S24, actually isn't regular sized by today's standards. It's kind of small. And the S24 Plus is more or less the same size as like literally every other Android device on the market, including phones from Samsung's own cheaper lineup, like the A15 and the S23 FE. It's kind of a bummer if you're used to big phones or you prefer something larger, because in going with the S24 Plus, you also have to spend a few $100s more. Now, I know a handful of people who prefer small phones too, so saving money and getting a more compact and comfortable device with the regular S24 might be like a 1-2 punch for those folks value-wise. But unlike in years past, when you were basically just paying for the bigger sized screen, the S24 Plus this year has a number of additional advantages that justify its higher price tag. One of the most overlooked, I think, is the fact that the S24 Plus gets double the storage. The base configuration option on the regular S24 is a measly 128 gigabytes, which honestly, for a flagship phone where you'll have 40 or 50 apps installed, hundreds, if not thousands of pictures, potentially 4K or even 8K videos, documents, files, that can all fill up pretty quickly. And obviously, see, there's no micro SD card slot on these phones, so your only other option is some sort of cloud storage subscription if you run out of space. The S24 Plus with 256 gigabytes of storage is probably more than enough for 99% of people, and it'll last a lifetime in smartphone years, so 4 or 5 years probably, without filling up. And what's especially annoying actually is that even if you wanted to pay more for a lot more storage, well, you can only get up to 256 gigabytes on the regular S24. The Plus at least has a 512 gigabyte option, and maybe Samsung figured that very few people would want to spec up the regular S24 with a ton more storage, or maybe they really want to sell you a cloud subscription. But I saw plenty of people talking about the lack of storage options, so maybe Samsung underestimated that a little bit. Now, for me personally, the biggest reason I prefer the S24 Plus this year is because not only is the screen bigger, but it's also better spec-wise. And I don't know that many people will care or even notice this, but for the spec snobs like myself, or for those of you who truly want the best bang for your buck, this is something Samsung did this year that I think made the S24 Plus even more enticing than in previous years. So on the surface, most of the core screen things are the same. The smaller 6.2-inch regular S24 has the same LTPO AMOLED 2X panel as the larger 6.7-inch S24 Plus. They both have a dynamic 120Hz high refresh rate, which makes things silky smooth visually and ultra responsive while also conserving power and battery life. And they both are technically a bit brighter, and the glass is what's supposed to be a better, less glare prone and tougher Gorilla Glass Victus 2, but in my experience, there's still lots of fingerprints, and I can see my ugly face in the reflection more times than I care to, so don't bank on that being noticeably better. The difference between these two phones, though, is in their resolution. The regular S24 is a familiar 2340 by 1080, while the S24 Plus can be set to Quad HD, 3120 by 1440, with no compromise in refresh rate. The extra 100 or so pixels per inch isn't something you'll probably notice unless you look really close, but I think it's the principle of the thing more than anything else. This big phone requires a higher resolution to stay sharp, and once again, when you factor in the few $100 more this phone costs, you've got to give customers a little extra. Also, it wasn't that long ago that Samsung's regular S series had a 1440 resolution screen by default, so I guess thanks for sort of bringing that back. I'll also just say one other thing about this. Make sure you do actually enable the higher resolution in settings, unless you really need the little extra battery life it may take from you. You paid the extra money for the pixels on the S24 Plus, so you may as well use them. As far as performance, I'm actually going to do a rapid fire pros and cons list, and you can let me know if you agree or disagree with me. So con, both phones are powered by the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip. I wish the S24 Plus had a little more power, something discernible to separate it, but whatever, it's fine. Also a con, you may not get the Snapdragon chip in your S24 or S24 Plus if you live in Europe or Asia or some other part of the world that isn't the US. Sorry about that, but Samsung, for some reason, is still pushing their Exynos chips, which generally don't perform as well and continue to be loathed by Samsung users. Pro, the S24 Plus actually does have more RAM, 12 gigs to the regular S24's 8, so I guess you do get a little more, but not much. Con, the regular S24 only gets 8 gigabytes of RAM. I realize that's fine for most people. It's even been fine for me. But if you push your phone really hard, and you specifically are buying the flagship Samsung phone, I think you'll probably feel some type of way about the fact that other cheaper devices out there have 12 or even 16 gigabytes of RAM. Pro, Samsung has pledged 7 years of Android OS updates for their S24s, which means you're going to be getting the new features and security patches first and for a really long time. And all the money you spend now, whether you buy the phones new at full price or steal a cheeky discount, that dollar is going to be stretched a heck of a lot further. Con, the leaked One UI 7 screenshots we just got kind of look like a bootleg iPhone iOS with the new app icons and a supposed dynamic island-like add-on and widgets and drop-down menu changes. So we'll see how that turns out, but I think the biggest pro in opting for an S24 or S24 Plus is the simple fact that you are still getting one of the best Android experiences paired to the fastest, most powerful hardware with as many features and things you could ever want. And some stuff, like the AI add-ons, you may never use, but are there anyway. And regardless of the negatives I mentioned, these are phones that will feel current and feature-packed and freshly updated, whether you buy them today or even a year from now. And I also think, honestly, when it comes to the speed and internal hardware, we've been at what I consider to be like peak smartphone for the last 2 or 3 years now. So, like, is next year's flagship going to be that much faster than these? Probably not. These phones are already faster and more powerful than most people can fully utilize day to day anyway, so how much more power could you possibly want? Now, I mentioned at the start that the S24 Plus technically does have a larger size battery, which makes sense. It's a bigger phone, so it has more space to hold it, but at 4,900 milliamps, it's not like drastically bigger than the 4,000 milliamps in the regular S24. And on top of that, if you're like me and you're using the phone with the QHD screen resolution enabled and it's always at a higher brightness, the S24 Plus is probably not going to give you that much more usage during the day before needing a charge. If you're a little more strategic, you can probably squeeze out an extra half an hour to an hour of use on a single charge with the Plus. But the real benefit is that the Plus actually has faster wired charging at 45 watts. The regular S24 tops out at 24 watts. So even if you don't conserve that bigger battery all that well, you'll still spend less time plugged in. So finally, I generally think the S24 and S24 Plus are great overall picture and video takers, and even these phones have shooting modes and features that a lot of people won't notice, utilize, or fully understand. Some stuff, like the 3x optical zoom and the super steady video recording, is really practical in everyday life. Other stuff, like 8K video recording, is probably never going to get enabled by most people. I think my main gripe, though, and I don't know how to solve this, but I just want to say it anyway, is that I wish the S24 Plus had a little more in the camera department to differentiate it. I think getting the same hardware and features on the regular S24 is a big win. A lot of times, the Plus or Pro model of a phone does have more. And obviously the S24 Ultra exists, which is a totally different animal, but it's way, way better, of course. But even like a better telephoto lens at a minimum on the Plus would have been good. 5 or 10x optical and 50 or 100 times zoom, maybe even a sharper, higher megapixel shooting mode, or something for the aspiring filmmakers, which again, I realize goes against what I just said about the unnecessary extras on these phones, but some people do get use out of that stuff. Overall, the S24 and S24 Plus are a top 10 and probably a top 5 smartphone for pictures and videos, but I just feel like there likely needs to be something else offered on the Plus to further motivate people to choose it. Perhaps that's something Samsung opts for on next year's phones. Now, I want to make sure I reiterate the fact that Samsung's S24s, regardless of their steep depreciation and discounted prices, are great phones overall. I personally think the S24 Plus in particular this year is the one to buy, but the smaller regular S24 offers a ton of value, and it'll probably feel better in your pocket too. I just wanted to call out the fact that after just 6 months, you can get these current top tier flagship phones for a heck of a lot cheaper. And you should, because you can also probably keep these phones now for at least the span of their supported Android updates, and probably well beyond that if you want. That's a 7-year investment for a flagship phone that's potentially up to 50% off at the moment. I don't see any negatives here. And if you were one of the patient ones who waited, well, the time is now. The S24s are suddenly a really great buy. But what do you guys think about the S24 and S24 Plus now? Is this a good time to buy one, or are you maybe waiting for next year's phones already? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, or at least found it somewhat interesting. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.